Welcome to the Crawcast. I'm your host, George Krawczak, and today we are previewing and analyzing the June 27th presidential debate between the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump and the Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden. We'll look at the debate rules and standards, the strategy and goals of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, the positives and negatives for Donald Trump and Joe Biden for this debate, and analyzing the two previous presidential debates and seeing if this debate will even matter. Let's get started. The first is the debate rules and standards. This debate is moderated by Dana Bash and Jake Tapper. I think this benefits Joe Biden. Both are Democrats, with Jake Tapper being a more moderate one. There is no doubt that they will both be voting for Joe Biden in this upcoming election. The question is, how biased will the questions be, if they will be biased at all? I simply don't know this because I don't have the questions in front of me. The second rule is there is no audience. This helps Joe Biden. Donald Trump is a showman and a comedian. He likes to play off the audience and have lines in his speeches and debates that elicit an audience reaction, whether it's cheers or laughs. I also think this hinders the debate quite a bit. The secret truth about debates is for a while they have not been about policy at all. For a while they've turned into who can have the best one-liners and moments. I say this because can you name a single thing that was said in the last two Donald Trump and Joe Biden debates? You probably can't. The two moments that come to my mind are what Ronald Reagan said while he was debating Walter Mondale. He was effectively asked if he was too old to be president. Yes, at the time, he is 5 years younger than Donald Trump is now and 9 years younger than Joe Biden is now, but I digress. He said, I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience. Another good line is in the 2016 presidential debate when Hillary Clinton said that it's great that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not president of the United States. Donald Trump responded, because you'll be in jail. Notice how those two memorable statements have nothing to do with policy, yet they're played almost every time we come up to a debate. Those lines are memorable because the audience laughed and enjoyed those lines for entertainment. With no audience, we will simply not know what lines are good and bad and which ones land and don't. I just say this benefits Joe Biden because I think Donald Trump is more likely to get one of those one-liners in as opposed to Joe Biden. The next rule is that they'll be seated at a desk instead of standing at a podium. I actually think this rule helps Donald Trump. I think it's weird that Joe Biden's team requested sitting at a desk instead of standing at a podium. The main criticism of Joe Biden is that he's too old and feeble to be president. I think this is a bad look. Either him or his team don't believe he's able to stand/lean on a podium for an hour and a half to 2 hours. Maybe he is unable to stand for that long, but I think most Americans will see this as a bad look because I think a lot of them believe that unless you have an actual physical disability, which Joe Biden does not, you should be able to stand for an hour and a half to 2 hours to be president. The next rule is that the microphones will cut off after someone is done speaking. I think this rule will probably benefit Joe Biden, but it depends on how this is handled. I assume the moderators will handle this, and that is why I think it'll benefit Joe Biden, but it really depends on how they handle this. I think we can compare it to two of the Republican primary debates that just happened, one which was great and one which is terrible. There was the debate hosted by ABC, and there was basically no debating throughout the entire debate. It was just a mini interview with all the candidates. For example, I remember a moment where I believe it was Nikki Haley was asked a question, and in answering the question, she took a swipe at Vivek Ramaswamy. And Vivek Ramaswamy tried to respond, and then Kristen Welker cut him off and went to Christie for a completely unrelated topic. You need to let the candidates talk to each other and debate the issues, even if that requires you to miss a question or two. The next debate was hosted by Megyn Kelly on News Nation. This debate was handled perfectly. She asked a question and then just sat back and let the candidates discuss until either they are just going in circles and not being productive, or the conversation kind of died down and it seems like all the candidates were ready to move on and they made their points. So cutting off the microphones could be good or it could be bad depending on how the moderators handle it. The next rule is that there will not be any third-party candidates. This is specifically to not have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the stage. I think this helps both Donald Trump and Joe Biden equally. The reason I say that is because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said that he wants a COVID reckoning, and he wants to hold people accountable who made the vaccines and locked down the country. This hurts Donald Trump because he was one of those people. This also appeals to the average Republican voter who supports this kind of action and could show an alternative to Donald Trump. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being off the stage also helps Joe Biden. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s policies are a lot like Joe Biden's. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. can show some Democrats who you can have the same policies, but you can have someone who is much younger and more energetic than Joe Biden is. Honestly, I see both arguments for having him on the debate stage and keeping him off the debate stage. The people who want him on there will say he is polling at 20%, which is absolutely insane for a third party candidate. He will most likely get the most votes out of any third party candidate in history. The people who don't want him on the debate stage will argue he has a 0% chance at winning, so why bother having him up there taking up time for the two actual presidential contenders? I actually kind of agree with taking him off stage because he does not have a shot at winning. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Overall, I think this debate format favors Joe Biden. His campaign set all the rules, and I think it was kind of idiotic for Donald Trump to just accept the terms of the debate with having no say. I think Donald Trump was so desperate to debate Joe Biden that he would agree to essentially anything, and Joe Biden and his campaign definitely took advantage of that. Next is the strategy and goals of Donald Trump in this debate. Donald Trump's goal is to look more presidential than Joe Biden, to compare and contrast his and Joe Biden's administrations, and to try to stump and or confuse Joe Biden. For Donald Trump to win this debate, he needs to remain calm and focused. He cannot get overly emotional or angry. He needs to show the American people that what he believes is the biggest difference between him and Joe Biden is the mental acuity. He needs to show that he is mentally sharper and also more presidential than Joe Biden. I know hope is not a strategy, but I think he needs Joe Biden to have a moment or two where he seems very confused and he struggles to handle this debate against him. The positives for Donald Trump to help him achieve his goal in this debate. The first one is that there is a lot of foreign chaos. Joe Biden's chief pitch in contrast to Donald Trump in the 2020 presidential election is that Donald Trump is a very chaotic person and Joe Biden will bring stability to our country. This evidently has not happened. Joe Biden gave full control of Afghanistan to the Taliban. Under his watch, Russia and Ukraine are at war, and Israel and Hamas are at war. The American people feel nervous for the world and see that we are much closer to World War III under Joe Biden than under Donald Trump. Donald Trump can use the foreign policy chaos to contrast himself and show how under him the Middle East and the world was much more peaceful and under control. The second thing that helps Donald Trump is the border. The American people see illegal aliens run through the border and some are committing additional crimes. I think a lot of people see the chaos and that the United States of America is allowing so many people in with very little vetting. The next positive for Donald Trump is inflation. Under Donald Trump, the inflation rate was much better than under Joe Biden. The interesting thing about the economic numbers, to me, is I think we need to decide, do the 2020 numbers count as part of Donald Trump's record? I think it is a serious question, and unfortunately, I think it has been boiled down to if you like Donald Trump, you don't count it, and if you don't like Donald Trump, you do count it. I understand both sides. The argument for counting it is that it did indeed happen under his watch while he was president, and thus the lockdowns impacting the economy should be a part of his record. The other side of the argument is that it was a very erroneous outlier event and it should not count. Just like after 9/11, the airline industry's numbers went really down and hurt a lot, but it was an erroneous outlier event that was not their fault. I don't know if we should count it or not. Let me know in the comments if you think the 2020 economic numbers should count for or against Donald Trump, or should they just not count at all. There are also some negatives that will hinder Donald Trump from achieving his goal during this debate. I think one negative is him denying the election of 2020 and him being unable to move on. The fact is that regardless if you think the 2020 election is rigged or you think everything was completely fine, Joe Biden is now the president and the American people have moved on. Nobody likes him rehashing old news, and it just makes him look bad by being unable to move on. The next thing is the possible felony conviction. This is being recorded before Donald Trump's trial is finished, so I don't know if he was found guilty or he was acquitted. The point is, if Joe Biden and the moderators can consistently refer to Donald Trump as a convicted felon and be right about it, I think it'll severely hurt Donald Trump and his image among voters. If he is convicted, the American people don't like feeling that they're supporting a criminal. The final negative is possibly the moderators. These moderators are both presumably voting for Joe Biden, and I think they could ask some very left leaning questions and potentially give Donald Trump harder questions than Joe Biden. So this requires him to be laser focused and prepared for potentially any question. Next, we will look at the strategy and goals of Joe Biden. His first goal is to make Donald Trump angry and emotional. Just like in the first debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump came in way too hot and was screaming the whole time. Donald Trump looked horrible in that debate. So if Joe Biden can make Donald Trump kind of lose it a little bit and show he is unable to control his emotions, Joe Biden will win this debate. Joe Biden also needs to show his mental toughness. People perceive Joe Biden as mentally unfit for office, so he needs to show the American people that he is definitely up for the job mentally. In doing so, this also requires him to show a lot of energy. This is Joe Biden's biggest opportunity to show the American people that he can and should still be president. There are some positives that will help Joe Biden win this debate. The first positive is the debate expectations for Joe Biden. I think Donald Trump is making a huge mistake in tearing down Joe Biden. Donald Trump keeps saying things like Joe Biden is the worst debater he has ever seen, how he will destroy Joe Biden, and how Joe Biden can't string together three sentences. This sets Joe Biden's expectations extremely low. I think in the sense that as long as Joe Biden does not have like a brain aneurysm on stage or completely collapses mentally, it'll look like a win for Joe Biden. His expectations are set so low that he almost has no choice but to exceed them. The next positive is the debate format. All of these debate rules were decided by Joe Biden and his campaign. This theoretically is the best conditions possible for Joe Biden to debate in. He wanted all these specific rules for a reason, and I think his team is competent enough to know that if they wanted a rule, it was probably for a really good reason. The third positive is the possible Trump felony conviction. Again, this is recorded before Donald Trump's trial has concluded, but his goal is to make Donald Trump angry and look as unstable and as unpresidential as possible. If Joe Biden keeps calling him a felon, I think there's a good chance that this could throw Donald Trump off his game and make him kind of lose control of his emotions and strategy. There are also a few negatives that'll hinder Joe Biden's strategy. This is kind of just a reverse of the positives of Donald Trump. The problem with Joe Biden is that he has to argue that inflation is good, which, even though it has gone down a little bit, is still extremely high. He also needs to argue that Ukraine versus Russia, Hamas versus Israel, and the Taliban taking Afghanistan under his control is also a good thing. He also has to defend an open border. He may be able to do all these things, but I think it'll be extremely difficult for him. I think to predict what will happen in the debate, we need to analyze what happened in their two previous debates. I just want to say off the bat, I don't think either of them are particularly good at debating, but in the first debate, I would say Joe Biden won. For this debate, Donald Trump looked horrible. He clearly had talking points and arguments he wanted to say during this debate, but instead of trying to cleverly insert those lines at the right time, he basically just said them all at once so he wouldn't forget to mention them. He would not let anyone else get a word in. He also seemed to get emotional and angry when Joe Biden refused to answer his questions. I think Joe Biden performed fine. Like, I don't think he did anything good, but I also didn't think he did anything bad. So in this first debate, I give Donald Trump a negative grade, and I give Joe Biden a net neutral grade. For the second debate, I would say Donald Trump won. I think Donald Trump looked really good. He was polished, he was calm, he was focused, and it felt like he knew what he was talking about. Just like the first debate, Joe Biden was just there. He didn't do anything bad, and he didn't do anything good. For this debate, I give Donald Trump a net positive grade, and I again give Joe Biden a net neutral grade. Overall, I think debate will come down to if Donald Trump can handle himself correctly. I think Joe Biden will probably do fine. I don't know. It has been 4 years, so he may not be able to mentally handle these debates. But who knows? Because, like I said, it's been 4 years since we've seen him do it. And I just don't think Joe Biden will do anything special, but Donald Trump will be either spectacular or absolutely horrible. And if you want me to bet on who I'd say would win this debate, I think it's because his expectations are so incredibly low and he made the debate rules. I think Joe Biden is more likely to win. It's like in a football game, if a team is projected to lose by 40 points and they end up losing by 20, that's still terrible loss, but when you're expected to lose by 40 that and you only lose by 20, that ends up being a great performance. Overall, the best piece of advice for both candidates is to just step back, shut up, and let the other one hopefully fail. If I was Joe Biden, I would step back and hope Donald Trump gets emotional and kind of loses his cool. And if I was Donald Trump, I would step back and hope that Joe Biden mental acuity fails and he struggles to answer the questions. The big question is, does this debate even matter? Overall, I don't think this debate will matter much. The American people's memories last about 5 minutes, and this debate is way too early in the process for the American people to remember it come November. The one debate that I think will be very interesting is the vice presidential debate between Kamala Harris and whoever Donald Trump picks as his running mate. I say this because, given the ages of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, I think there is a 100% chance that Kamala Harris will be president and a 50% chance that whoever Donald Trump picks to be vice president will end up eventually becoming president. And there are two things I can guarantee will happen during this election cycle. I think this will be a very close election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, with both having a chance at winning. I think whoever wins will just barely win. Also, the second thing is whoever loses will call the election rigged. I say this because Donald Trump called the 2020 election rigged, and the last election, Democrats lost and that they didn't claim was rigged was in 1988 with George Bush. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, and if you like this type of content, make sure to hit the subscribe button like it owes you money. I'll see you next time.